Okay, so last day we started looking at how can we create an equation from a table. And we said that an equation generally looks like this. Y is equal to mx plus b. And there's two numbers you need to figure out to make the equation work. You need to figure out what is the coefficient, the number in front of the x, and you need to figure out what is the constant. Okay? So last day, I gave you pictures of patterns, and you use those patterns to figure out the table, then determine the equation. Now, you're not always going to be given a picture to figure out the pattern. Sometimes you'll be given a word statement that relates a pattern. Right? Now, in this particular question, it says, this is the pattern that we have. A number pattern starts at 1.5. So your first figure starts at 1.5. And it says each number after that is 4 more than the number before. So if I wanted to figure out the next number in this sequence, what would this be? Max?
3.
Not 3. Phoenix?
5.5.
5.5. In the question, they say it's 4 more than the previous number. So we have to add 4 here. Right? So what would this one be?
9.
9.5. Right? Then 4 more. 13.5. And 17.5. Okay? Now, that is translating the information given in the question to create a set of values. Now we need to create this equation. Now to create the equation, the first number we said, hey, how much is this growing by? How much does your y value increase or decrease each time? So in this question, how much is it increasing or decreasing each time?
4.
Increasing at 4, right? So the way it works, your coefficient was for every 1 increase in here, how much does this change by? And that changed by positive 4. So our coefficient, our m value, is 4. And what that did is it allowed us to create a temporary equation. Y is equal to 4x. Right? And so we got halfway there. We just need to figure out what do we have to add or subtract to make this equation work. Right? So you use this equation, and we see how do we need to adjust this. So we have our equation so far as 4x. And we plug in our value, and we can use any spot on the table. The first one has the number 1 on it. That's an easy number to calculate with. So I plug in 1 for the value of x, and I get a number out. And I got 4 times 1 is 4. Now this should have been 1.5 if it worked properly. So we need to adjust this equation. We need to add or subtract a number. What do we have to add or subtract? Yes, Gravir.
Subtract 2.5.
Subtract 2.5. These 4. Start it up. Come on, calculator. We go 4 minus 2.5 gets us our 1.5. So that was Gravir's guess, and it looks like it works. So now we test out our pattern that we came up with, our equation. Yes, Max?
Number 4.
With number 4, sure. Let's try number 4 here. So our equation is 4x minus 2.5. So we test it out. So we go 4. This time we're going to plug in the number 4. Oops. Plug in the number 4. And we're going to subtract 2.5. See if it works. So we have 4 times 4 is 16 minus 2.5. And 16 minus 2.5, yes indeed, is 13.5. So our equation works. Okay. Okay. And once we have created our equation, we confirmed that it works. I always go to the default using y's and x's, but that was not what we should be using. We should be using more meaningful letters, right? Our y is this column. So instead of using the letter y, what letter should we use? V for value. That makes sense. So I'm going to write out our equation here. Instead of y, I'm using v, which stands for value. Instead of x, what should I use? N. For n stands for number. So Vn minus 2.5. Right? And if you see this right off the bat, you can start using v's and n's right off the bat. You don't have to use x's and y's. Right? I like using x's and y's because that's what you can use a lot next year for equations a lot. So now you have an equation that you can use to determine future patterns. Right? So we apply this equation to the next question. It says, what is the value of the 95th term? So we have our equation here, and then we need to stick the number 95 in. Two spots can go in for v or n. Where does it go? N, right? We're talking about terms. N is the number of terms. So where we see n, we stick in 95 minus 2.5. Okay? And we calculate. We go 4 times 95. And we subtract 2.5. Oops. 2.5. We get 377.5. Okay? So we can say the value of the 95th term is 377.5. Okay? All right. We have one more question on this one here. So which term has a value of 237.5? So once again, we set up our equation. We use it to find this term. Where does that 237.5 go in? Is it going for V or N?
V.
V, right? That's talking about a value. So our value is, we put in 237.5. Right? Then this becomes a question from last chapter, because we need to solve for our letter. Right? We need to figure out what n is. So on the side of the letter, remember we split our equation here, if you're forgetting. Right? We need to get rid of the 4 and the 2.5. Which number do we move over first? How does it look like on the other side?
Plus 2.5.
Plus. It becomes the opposite when you move an entire term from one side to the other. So plus 2.5 over here. So we get 4n sitting here. And what do we have on the other side? 240. Good. All right. Then you need to get rid of that 4. How do we get rid of that 4? Divide. Thank you. We divide by 4. We divide by 4. The 4's disappear. N equals, what's 240 divided by 4? 60. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So we'll do one more question. Then we'll save the other two as a warm-up before you guys do the assignment next class. So we'll do the top right-hand one. Okay? Now, this question doesn't give you a word statement to create the table. It doesn't give you a picture to create the table. But it just gives you a table with a pattern in it. Yes, Max?
You wrote n instead of V.
It is n.
Isn't it V?
No, we're solving for n. We plugged in 237.5 for v. We're solving for n. At the end, 4 has disappeared. You left it to n here. And 60. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, one of the things to keep straight in your mind, the equation is always going to be y equals something, right? That's why they're using x's and y's constantly. So when you have a column like this, first column's x, second column's y. So the equation is going to be always y equals something. In this case, t equals, right? Right? That's the way it sets up. Y equals. So this is our y column, so that's going to be t equals. So we need to create our equation. First number is how much is this increasing by or decreasing by each time? Yes, Phoenix?
Increasing by 5.
Increasing by 5. So we go plus 5, plus 5, plus 5. So I'm going to start creating the equation using the appropriate letters. So you have t, and that 5 is the number in front of the x. For x, we're using the letter d. Right? You can use x's and y's if you want. Okay. So now we need to figure out what do we add or subtract to make this equation work. So we test it out with a point. Which point do you want to use to test out?
0.
0. I hear a 0 out loud. So I'm going to test it out right here. So our equation is 5d. Where we see d, we're going to plug in the 0. So we have 5 times 0. We get 0 out. But it should have been 11. So how do we change our equation? Yes, Gravir?
Plus 11.
Plus 11. So if you add 11 to this, we get 11 out. So we have an equation that looks t is equal to 5d plus 11. All right? We test it out, make sure we've done it correctly now. Which other point would you want to test it with?
3.
Sorry? With 3? Okay. So we have 5d plus 11. We plug in the numbers. We have 3 for a value d here. Oops. 5, 3 plus 11. So we get 15 plus 11, which is 26. So that works. Okay, and that's it. All right. So our equation has a spot for our equation. T is equal to 5d plus 11. And that's it. So the other two questions we'll use as a warm-up before you guys do your assignment next day. We got 5 minutes left. Enjoy a little bit of break.